So it's my pleasure to introduce Ankit Garg from Microsoft Research Bangalore. So he will be giving us two talks on primarily related to his work in this area. So this is going to be the first talk in the algorithms part. Yes. So Ankit will today talk about matrix scaling. Ankit, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Kevi, for inviting me to give the talk. So this is the first talk in a series of 5 lectures by Rafael Oliveira, Cole Franks, and me. So we'll be talking about uh, analytic algorithms for various problems, various computational problems arising out of invariant theory. So the first 2 lectures I'll give, and these will be on problems arising from torus action. Okay? And then Rafael and Cole will talk about general group actions. So the first, so this talk is going to be about a problem called matrix scaling. So this is a very well-studied problem and has found lots of applications in various scientific disciplines. We won't talk about, we won't go into the applications much. So today I'll introduce the problem matrix scaling. Then we'll also see how this problem is related to invariant theory. And then we'll also see some algorithms for this problem. So let's get started. So what is matrix scaling? So this is the problem. So we're given a matrix A, which is n by n and has non-negative real entries, and we want to so we want to scale the rows and columns to make all the row and column sums 1. Okay. And so such a matrix whose all row and column sums are 1 is also called doubly stochastic. Okay. So the problem is simply to scale A to make it doubly stochastic, and scaling here refers to the operation of multiplying all the rows and columns by scalars. Okay? So each row or each column you can multiply by a scalar. So pictorially, this is how this will look like. So we have a matrix A, and each of the rows we can multiply by a scalar. So row I you can multiply by alpha I. In each of the columns you can multiply by scalar beta I. Okay? So ith column will be multiplied by beta I, right? So so you get a new matrix, and the conditions are that all the row sums are 1, so that sum over j going from 1 to n, aij alpha I beta j is 1 for all I in n, and also all the column sums are 1, that sum of I going from 1 to n, aij alpha I beta j is 1 for all j. So this is the problem. Okay. So feel free to stop at any point if something is not clear.
Yeah, those alpha i's and beta j's are those required to be positive, non-negative?
Yes. Good point. So alpha I and beta I are non-negative. Yeah. I mean, in fact, positive, right? You cannot. Yeah, if you multiply by 0, the row will become 0. Okay. So let's look at some examples. So for example, let's look at the following matrix. So let's say this is a 2 by 2 matrix, 2 1 1 1. Yeah, how do we make it doubly stochastic? So I computed this. You can try to compute it yourself. Let me just copy the solution. Okay. So the solution is, so you multiply here by 1 over root 2 This is 1. This is root 2 minus 1. This is 2 minus root 2. Yeah, so the matrix we get is the following. So this becomes 2 minus root 2. This becomes root 2 minus 1. This also becomes root 2 minus 1. This 2 minus root 2. Okay. Yeah, so this is the scaling. And yeah, you can verify that all the row and column sums are 1. Okay. Yeah, so this is one example how we scale. Yeah, perhaps not so easy because it involves irrationals. Okay. So this is when we can scale. So of course, if you have a all zero matrix, then we cannot scale it, right? The matrix will always remain 0. So also if any of the rows or columns is all zeros, then also we cannot scale, right? Because that particular row or column will remain all zero only. Okay, so a more interesting example of a matrix that cannot be scaled is the following. 0, 1, 1, 1. Yeah, so this you can try to convince yourself. Yeah, maybe might require some calculation that yeah, this also cannot be scaled to W square. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, by the end of the you'll definitely know why this cannot be scaled, but yeah, you can try to prove this yourself in the meantime. Yeah, but this is not like a trivial matrix, right? All the rows and columns are non-zero, yet this cannot be scaled. Okay, so next example. So yeah, so next we have a interesting example. So let's consider this matrix 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay. Yeah, so this also cannot be scaled. Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, this is a simple calculation. You can try to prove, and yeah, you won't be able to scale this matrix. However, you can sort of scale this matrix in the limit. So what do I mean? So yeah, so you consider the scaling. So you multiply here by epsilon, here by 1, here by 1, here by 1 over epsilon. So what you get is epsilon 1, 1, 0. And when we'll take the limit epsilon tending to 0, we get a doubly stochastic matrix. Okay. Yeah, so we'll call such matrices scalable in limit. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is not a standard name. I just invented this term for the talk. Yeah, I mean, there's no good name for actually these matrices. Just call them approximately scalable, but I think this might be a better name. Okay, so this phenomena is sort of similar to sort of the phenomena of orbits versus orbit closures. Right? So this phenomenon is similar to that. Okay. Like, yeah, I mean, orbit closures are different from orbits usually, right? So yeah, this is what is going on. And yeah, just as looking at orbit closures leads to a richer and nicer theory, right, in algebraic geometry. So same way here also, when we deal with scalable limit as the right notion, that leads to a nicer theory. Okay? So this leads us to the following question. When is a matrix A scalable in limit? Yeah, so we'll see the answer, and we also prove it in this lecture. Yes, the answer is the following. Yeah, so the following two are equivalent. A matrix is scalable in limit. And the second is that the support of the matrix has a perfect matching. Right. So here the support of the matrix is a n by n 0, 1 matrix. So it can be viewed as a bipartite graph. Okay. And yeah, the theorem is that the matrix is scalable in limit if and only if the support has a perfect match. Okay. Yeah, so feel free to ask any question.
Can you drive it to any perfect matching of your choice? I mean, any permutation matrix which is in the support of your choice? Or?
No, so yeah, you're asking what will be the final.
Yeah, can you control that by?
No,
by
in fact, one cannot control that. In most cases, probably all cases, the final doubly stochastic matrix that we get will be unique. Okay? Will be a unique doubly stochastic scaling that we get, and that will be some convex mixture of these perfect matchings.
Oh, okay. Some kind of, okay. Will it be a uniform convex mixture of them or?
Not always. It can be a non-uniform mixture also. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, depends on the matrix. Yeah. Yeah, so actually we don't have a very good interpretation of what this final doubly stochastic scaling is like. Yeah, it's not clear. Yeah, what interpretation to give to it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. What do you mean about the n by n bipartite graph? I think each part has n vertices, right?
Yes. So there are two sides, n vertices each. Yeah.
Yes, but the n time n here because I missed. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let me give examples. Yeah. So let's consider this matrix 1, 1, 1, 0.
Yes,
Yeah, so
yes, because the just n time n makes me confused.
Yeah, sorry. So is it clear now?
I mean the n time n bipartite graph right here is make me confused. Yeah.
Okay,
so,
sorry.
Yeah. No, I think what here all he means is n vertices on one side, n vertices on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. What's happened? Okay. So yeah. So this matrix corresponds to the graph where the first vertex is joined to both the vertices. Second vertex is joined here. Yeah. So this has a perfect matching, right? Obviously. This one. Yeah. So this has a perfect matching, and it is scalable limit. Yeah, so now let's look at the example I gave you to work it out. So 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Yeah, so this corresponds to the graph here. We have 3 vertices on each side, and the first vertex is joined to last 2. Second is joined to here. Yeah, so this obviously doesn't have a perfect matching because the second 2 vertices are the second and third vertices are joined to just one vertex. Yeah, so no perfect matching. Hence not scalable element. Okay. Yeah, so yeah. So we'll next see the proof of the above theorem. Yeah, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yeah, otherwise let's prove this.
So support just means that you make all the non-zero entries 1, correct? Support of A.
Yes, support of A meaning, yeah, all the non-zero entries you make 1.
Okay.
Okay, the proof of theorem. Yeah, so for now we'll prove one side uh, of the implication. The other implication actually will see a more stronger algorithmic version later in the talk. Okay, so let's say, yeah, so suppose A is scalable in limit. Okay, and yeah, and yeah, and let the limit in this case be some matrix P. Okay? Yeah, so note that we are just multiplying the rows and the columns by scalars and then taking the limit. So the support of B.
So can I ask one question?
Yes.
So the multipliers, there are some expressions involving this epsilon, which in the limit goes to 0.
Right.
And the expressions can be anything, is it?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can be anything. Yeah.
Anything involving epsilon. No restrictions on the form in which epsilon is used.
No, no. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So I have one more question.
Yes.
So the scalars have only one parameter, epsilon, correct? There is no other parameter there, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't think of. Yeah, you may not even think of it in terms of parameter epsilon. You can just produce a sequence of scaling, and the limit should go to.
Yeah, but then the sequence has just epsilon as a variable, right? There's no other thing which is varying apart from the epsilon. As something as epsilon goes to 0.
It might be possible to think of it in terms of epsilon, like it might be yeah, if you leave, but yeah, it's just a limit. You can just produce a sequence of matrices, infinite sequence of matrices, each of which is a scaling of A, and the limit should be doubly stochastic. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it need not be epsilon. Yeah, but yeah, probably it will be epsilon. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so if A is scalable limit and the limit is B of the sequence of scalings, then support of B has to be a subset of support of A. Right? Because yeah, this is true for each scaling. In fact, the support will be exactly equal in each scaling, and then we are taking the limit. Okay, so zeros cannot become non-zero. And B is also doubly stochastic. Yeah, so now, yeah, I was going to do a proof from scratch, but yeah, I think maybe it'd be wise to not do that. So yeah, I'll just invoke this theorem. So there's the Birkhoff von Neumann theorem, which states that a doubly stochastic matrix is a convex combination of permutation matrices. Okay. So in particular, the support of B will contain a perfect matching. Yeah, so I mean, there's an elementary way of proving this using Hall's theorem. But yeah, I think I'm kind of, yeah, we won't be able to get to more interesting things. So let me skip that. So yeah, but yeah, this is a very well-known theorem, okay, and quite elementary to prove as well. Yeah, so this proves one side of the implication that if A is scalable in limit, then support of A contains a perfect match. So the other side we'll see later, and actually we'll see an algorithmic version of it. How do we algorithmically produce the scaling if support of A contains a perfect match? Okay. Okay. So next, we are going to see the connection to invariant query. Yeah, so here we'll consider a particular action. We'll consider the action of the group STN cross STN. So this is the special torus on the vector space of n by n matrices. Okay. So recall that this STN is just the set of diagonal matrices with determinant 1. Okay. And the action is given by, so if you have matrices A comma B, the group element A comma B that acts on the matrix M by just left and right multiplication. So that is the action. And yeah, so the connection comes out of asking the following question. Yeah, so what is the null cone of this group action? Yeah, so you might have seen the definition of the null cone in the previous lectures, but let me just remind you. So the null cone, so yeah, let me just state it for this particular group action, but this is a general definition. It's the set of all matrices or the elements of the vector space that the action is on, such that there exists a sequence of group elements A1, B1, AK, BK, such that the limit k tending to infinity of AK, BK acting on M is 0. So again, so the null cone is a set of all matrices such that there's a sequence of group elements that drive this matrix to 0. Okay. Yeah, so this you can define for any group action, and we'll be considering this particular group action. Yeah, so now we can extend our equivalence by one more point. Theorem. Yeah, so let M be a matrix n by n complex matrix, and also let A be a matrix with non-negative real entries that is given by Aij equals absolute value of Mij square. So this is sort of the translation between these two things. Okay, I mean, here we have to deal with complex matrices, but you just take the absolute value square of each entry, it becomes a non-negative real matrix. That's the translation. So the first 2 points remain the same. A is scalable in limit. The second point is support of A contains a perfect matching. And the third point now is that M is not in the null of the above group H. Okay. Yeah, so this is the connection of this problem to invariant query. Basically, it's the null cone problem for a very specific and simple torus action. Okay, questions? Okay, so if there are no questions.
Sorry, I am confused about the statement of the theorem.
Yes.
You are saying these are equivalent or something like that? M is in M
Oh,
and C.
sorry. Yes. Yes, these are equivalent. Yeah, so all these three statements are equivalent. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's prove this theorem. Yeah, so first 2 points we already saw, except 1.1 equivalence we'll prove later. So let's prove the equivalence between 2 and 3. Yeah, so let's first prove 2 implies 3. Yeah, so assume that support of A contains a perfect matching. So which is the same as saying that support of M contains a perfect matching. So this means that there exists a permutation sigma such that the product over I going from 1 to n, M I comma sigma I is non-zero. Okay? That's what it means, that the support contains a perfect match. So now let A and B, A comma B be a group element, Stn cross Stn. So, and let M prime be the element we get by acting A comma B on M. Okay. So then let's calculate the above value. So product over I going from 1 to n for M prime I comma sigma I. So this is equal to product over I going from 1 to n M I sigma I A I B sigma I. That is the action. Sorry. Okay. Let's call these AII and B sigma. Yeah. So then, yeah, this will be equal to product I going from 1 to n, Mi sigma I, and then product over I AII and product over I B sigma I sigma I. Yeah, so A and B are elements of the special torus. So these products of the diagonal entries is 1. So this will be just equal to product over I going from 1 to n, mi sigma I. Yeah, so in the language of invariant theory, we'll say that this 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 polynomial product over I mi sigma I is an invariant column for this group action. Yes. Yeah. So now, given the invariant polynomial, yeah. So consider. Yeah. So now it is quite a standard argument to prove that this cannot be in the null cone, that M cannot be in the null cone. So consider a sequence of group elements. So let Mk be the result of applying the kth group element to M. Then we know that product over I Mk I sigma I will be equal to product over I mi sigma, okay, because this is invariant with respect to group action. And let M star be the limit of Mk. So then by continuity, the product over I M star I sigma I will also be equal to product over I mi sigma I, which we know is non-zero. So hence M star is non-zero. Yeah, so this proves one side of the equivalence, and this uses the existence of an invariant column. Okay. Any question? Okay. So yeah, let's prove the other side. So 3 implies 2. Yeah, so actually it's easier to prove the contrapositive. Which is that is if support of M does not contain a perfect matching, then M is in the null form. Yeah, so for this we'll use Hall's theorem. Yeah, so recall that the Hall's theorem says that if a bipartite graph does not have a perfect matching, then there's a subset of vertices on one side uh, such that the set of neighbors of that subset of vertices is smaller than the size of the subset. So if you translate this into the language of matrices, into the language of 0-1 matrices, what this means is that there exists subsets S and T of n such that the size of S plus size of T is at least n plus 1, and the submatrix MST is completely 0. So pictorially, basically it means that there's a large submatrix which is 0. Yeah, so basically this complement will be the set of neighbors of S. And yeah, this condition S plus T is at least n plus 1 is saying that the set of neighbors is smaller than S. Yeah, so we have this situation. There's a large block of zeros, and we want to show that M is in the null code. So what we'll do is just try to construct an explicit construction that drives this matrix to 0. Let's do that. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, as you've seen, sort of there's a large block of zeros here. So we are free to, okay. So you want to drive this star things to 0. So it's good to multiply here and here by a small constant delta. But yeah, we cannot choose everything to be small because we need to maintain the determinant 1 constraint. The product of the everything you multiply the columns by should be 1, and the product of all the rows scalar should be 1. So we'll have to choose something large here. Let's say capital delta. Yeah, so we have the advantage that the zeros will remain zeros. We can choose something large over there. So as a first thing, let's try to make the product of all the scalars to be 1. There's a simple modification to make the individual things products to be 1 as well. Okay, so let us ensure the product of all the scalars is 1. Okay. So what that means is that so we have delta to the S times delta to the T. Sorry, capital delta, and then little delta to the n minus S and little delta to the n minus T. So this will be the product, and we just enforce this to be 1. Yeah, so this is delta S plus P, capital delta, little delta, 2n minus S. So because of the condition, so because S plus T is at least n plus 1, we can also say that S plus T is greater than 2n minus S plus T. Okay. So then the capital value of capital delta is 1 over delta 2n minus S plus T over S plus T. So this is equal to 1 over delta to the C for some constant C less than 1. That's all we'll use, just because of the condition on S plus T. Okay. So now let's see. So if you notice here, like, or here, what the entries are multiplied by is little delta times capital delta. This is what they multiplied by, and this will be delta over delta to the C, which will be delta to the 1 minus C. Okay, and C is less than 1. So we are free to drive little delta to 0, and all these stars will vanish. Okay? So which goes to 0 as little delta goes. Yeah. So so we managed to drive this matrix to 0. The only caveat is that now all the products are 1, not just the individual products. Okay, so that we can fix by an easy argument. Okay, any questions regarding this? But yeah, I mean, even if you don't follow this, is just a routine calculation, just giving you a flavor of what's going on. Okay, so now let's fix. Yeah, so to rephrase what we have proven, there exists a sequence A1, B1, AK, BK, such that like these AIs, BIs are now in the torus, not the special torus, and the determinant of AI times determinant of BI is 1, and we are driving this to 0. The limit. And limit k tending to infinity, AK M BK is 0. Yeah, but we wanted to make the individual determinants 1. So for that, we just make them 1. We'll define AK tilde to be AK over determinant of AK to the power 1 over n. Yeah, and BK tilde to be BK over determinant of BK to the power 1 over n. So now, yeah, so this actually doesn't really make a difference because AK tilde M BK tilde will be the same as AK M BK over determinant of AK determinant of BK to the power 1 over n, and this is the same as AKM BK because the product of the determinants was 1. Yeah, so there's some room, like, yeah, there's an extra parameter here. Okay, we can adjust it. Okay, yeah, so this proves that this AK tilde and BK tilde we can drive M to 0. Okay, that completes the proof.
Yeah, just to sort of connect it to what went on in the previous class, we could have done it with the complex torus also. And if I look at this complex group and I look at the null cone, then you're saying you can drive that original complex matrix to the null cone, to the origin.
Mm-hmm.
And by what people have said in the past, it is in the null, but you found an invariant polynomial. But if there is an invariant polynomial on which the original matrix is not 0, then it cannot be in the null.
Right.
I mean, I just thought I'll connect it up with.
Yes, exactly.
Because people have seen it in the complex world. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Nice.
So sorry, what is the length of the talk? Is it 75 minutes?
75 minutes. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Half an hour more. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll look at. I thought we'll look at some algorithms. Maybe we'll have time to only look at one algorithm. So yeah. So let's next is algorithms. How do you actually scale the matrix? Okay. Yeah. So the most natural and the most famous algorithm for this problem is something called Synchron's algorithm. Right. So yeah. So recall the setting. We're back to non-negative reals now. So yeah, we have a matrix n by n non-negative real entries, and we want to make the row and column sums 1. Okay? So notice that it's really easy to make all the row sums 1 by an operation called row normalize. So let R1 to Rn be the row sums of A. So then we can just multiply the rows by inverse of this row sum. So this will make all the row sums of A to be 1. Yeah, I mean, so this won't work if one of the row sums is 0. So in which case that row is completely 0 and we cannot scale it anyway, right? But yeah, if that degenerate case doesn't arise, we can make all the row sums to be 1. And similarly, we can also do column normalization. We can make the column sums to be 1. Let C1 to Cn be the column sums of A. So we can multiply the columns by the inverse of the columns. And this will make the column sums. But yeah, I mean, this might disturb the row sum. Okay? So yeah, so the natural idea, and this is the algorithm, is to just keep doing this repeatedly, okay? One after the other. So that is Synchron's algorithm. Yeah, so this was in 64. Yeah, so you just repeat for some number of steps. Let me call that capital N. Repeat for capital N steps. Row normalize. And then column normalize. Okay. And in the end, you output some A hat. Whatever you get. Yeah, so this is the algorithm. And yeah, it not only works, it actually works pretty efficiently. And yeah, we'll prove that now. Any questions about the algorithm? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. Just keep doing these 2 steps repeatedly. Okay, so let's analyze this algorithm. To analyze this algorithm, yeah, I'll need some kind of a definition to keep track of the progress of the algorithm, like how close to doubly stochastic it is getting. So let me just define this notation. Yeah, so I'll call it DS of A, short for doubly stochastic measure of A, which is sum over I, Ri minus 1 square, plus sum over J, 1 to n, Cj minus 1 square, where R1 to Rn are the row sums of A and C1 to Cn are the column sums of A. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so we want all the row and column sums to be all ones. So this is just the L2 squared distance to from the this all one vector of the row and column sum vector. Okay. Yeah, so we'll also need an input model, right, for an algorithm. Let me just specify the input model. So yeah, so let's for simplicity restrict to rational matrices. Yeah, I mean, you can make it Gaussian rational, but yeah, doesn't matter. So yeah, rational matrices, right? So that they can be explicitly described. So each entry Aij, let's say, is of the form Pij by Qij. So Pij and Qij are integers. And can be described using B bits. Okay. Yeah, so that is the input model. So in particular, each Aij will be at least 2 to the minus b and will be at most 2 to the b. That's just a consequence of the input model. Okay, so now we can state the theorem regarding the analysis of the above. Yeah, so suppose A is a rational matrix such that support of A has a perfect matching. So if support of A does not have a perfect matching, then we cannot scale anyway. Right? So yeah, then there's nothing to prove. So if it has a perfect matching, we want to say in how many steps will converge. So yeah, suppose it has a perfect matching. And yeah, so B is the representation size above mentioned. Then in capital N equals O of N log N plus B over epsilon steps. The algorithm will output a matrix A hat such that this DS measure for it is at most epsilon. Okay. The L2 square distance of the row and column vectors, column sum vectors from all ones will be at most epsilon. So yeah, that is the theorem statement. Okay. So pretty efficient. In roughly n over epsilon iterations, we'll get to something which is sort of epsilon goes to doubly stochastic. Yeah, so each operation, each step requires like n square time. So this is like kind of a n cube over epsilon time algorithm. So any questions about the theorem statement?
So is there any hope of a actual strongly polynomial time algorithm? Is there, or is it not possible at all? Do we know anything?
Yeah, so strongly polynomial, do you mean
log of epsilon? I mean, in terms of.
Okay, so yeah, so there are algorithms with dependence whose dependence on epsilon is logarithmic, and yeah, there are multiple such algorithms. So one way to see it is that you can frame this problem. Yeah, I don't know if I'll get to maybe in the next lecture. You can frame this problem as a convex optimization problem. And then you can use the standard tools like ellipsoid or interior point methods to get log 1 or epsilon dependence.
Okay. Okay.
So actually, strongly polynomial refers to something else. So strongly polynomial refers to the fact that the number of
entries. Yeah, correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I meant polynomial only. I just wanted log epsilon. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, but you can also get strongly polynomial. Like
okay. That is interesting.
There's a so actually, yeah, this theorem is from this paper. Okay. Yeah, so this theorem is from a paper of Lineal. Samorotin.
Samorotinsky. Yeah.
Sorry. And with this one from 98. And yeah, so they also
2000, the general version 2000,
general version
the
2000.
best readable version.
Okay. Yeah, so in that paper, they also have a strongly polynomial time algorithm where the number of arithmetic operations, basic arithmetic operations that you perform is independent of the bit sizes of
Bits.
the entries. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so let's prove this theorem. Yeah, so actually, again, over here, the invariant polynomial that we considered will come in handy. So yeah, so there exists a perfect matching. That means that there exists a permutation such that product over I, AI, sigma I is non-zero. Okay. So yeah, I mean, without loss of generality, let's just consider sigma to be identity, so that the product of the diagonal entries is non-zero. Yeah, so now let A prime be the matrix after the first operation, after the row normalization operation. Okay. So we know that each diagonal entry of this matrix will also be non-zero because the product is non-zero and we just multiplying by scalars. So this would imply that A prime I comma I, this is at least 1 over n times 2 to the 2b. Okay. So this is because to start with, the AII will be at least 2 to the minus b, right? Because of bit complexity. And then we're taking the row sum, which can be at most n times 2 to the b, and dividing by that. So this A prime diagonal entry will be at least 1 over n times 1 to the b, so that the value of the invariant polynomial product I going from 1 to n, A prime I comma I will be at least 1 over n 2 to the 2b to the n. Yeah, so actually this is a very standard trick by now. Like you'll notice in the coming lectures also. I mean, for matrix scaling, it's a very basic thing. There are multiple ways to analyze this, but the use of invariant polynomials in the analysis of algorithms, yeah, so you'll see in the coming lectures also. This will become a very standard thing. And yeah, how to control the values of the invariant polynomials if they are non-zero using this bit complexity kind of trick. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, this invariant polynomial, which is at least this. Yeah, maybe the use of invariant is a bit confusing. So sorry, yeah, I'll come to that. So yeah, so the lemma is, so suppose the matrix A prime is row normalized or column normalized. It is one of these two. And this product is non-zero. Also, it is somewhat far from being a doubly stochastic matrix. Okay? So there's some distance to go before it becomes doubly stochastic. Then the column normalization or the row normalization. So yeah, if it is row normalized, you do column normalization. If it's already column normalized, you do row normalization. Okay? So yeah, whatever it is, you do the opposite. So this operation will increase this product by a factor of e to the epsilon over 6. Sorry, do you hear some noise? Like, yeah, there's some noise in the house. Do you hear it or it's fine?
It's quite mild.
Yeah. So yeah, so they're saying that like these steps, right? This operation, column or row normalization, this will increase this product of the diagonal entries by a factor of e to the epsilon over 6. Okay? So if you're far from being doubly stochastic, then this will happen. If you have reached doubly stochastic, then there's nothing to do. If you're still far, then this potential function sort of will increase by a factor of e to the epsilon over 6. Yeah, so let's prove this. Yeah, so let's just do one case. The other is similar. So assume A prime is row normalized. Let A double prime be the column normalization of A. And let C1 to Cn be the column sums of A prime. Okay. So then we want to analyze how much this quantity increases by product of the diagonal entries. So this is just equal to product of the diagonal entries of A prime divided by the product of the columns. That is the operation we are doing. So since A prime is row normalized, hence the sum of the column sums, this is equal to the sum of the row sums, right? And this is just equal to n because it's row normalized. So then we can bound this product using the AMGM inequality. Which is 1. This product is at most 1. So that means that this product of the diagonal entries will always increase by this operation. But yeah, we wanted to bound it quantitatively, like we wanted to bound how much it will increase by. So for that, we haven't used the fact that A prime is still far from being close, being doubly stochastic. We know that sum over I, Ci minus 1 square, this is the doubly stochastic measure of A prime, which is at least epsilon. So yeah, I mean, in the AMGM inequality, right? The bad case is when all the CAs are 1, which cannot happen because it's still fast. So then it turns out that if all the CAs are not 1, then you can quantitatively bound how far away from 1 this product can be. Okay. So I'll leave this as an exercise. This is an elementary calculus kind of exercise. So let lambda 1 to lambda n be non-negative real numbers such that their sum is n, and they're far from being all 1. Okay. Then their product is bounded by e to the minus epsilon over 6. That's the exercise. And yeah, using this, we can say that this product will always increase by a factor of e to the epsilon over 6. Okay. Yeah, so now we have these 3 steps. Yeah, so we start with A prime equals rho normalized of A. And then the first step is that the value of this product of the diagonal entries, this is at least 1 over n times 2 to the 2b to the n to start with. And then as long as we are far away from doubly stochastic, each operation will increase this product by a factor of e to the epsilon over 6. And then finally, this quantity is always upper bounded by 1. If A prime is row or column normalized, which it will be during the course of the algorithm. Right, because if it's row or column normalized, then each of these diagonal entries has to be at most 1. Row, I mean, yeah, note that row or column normalized means the row or the column sums are 1. Yeah, so yeah, it is some things to start with, and as long as you're far from doubly stochastic, it'll always increase, and it's bounded. Okay? So in some finite number of steps, you must reach doubly stochastic. Okay? So yeah, so then this implies that in O of n log n plus b over epsilon steps, the algorithm will output a hat such that the distance to doubly stochastic is at most epsilon. Yeah, so that is the analysis. Yeah, it's quite elementary, but yeah, you have to set it up right by using this sort of potential function. Okay. Yeah, so actually I had some more material, but maybe I'll refer that to the next lecture. Yeah, maybe I'll stop for today.
Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. So are there any other questions people have for Ankit? I think it was a very lucid lecture. So, no questions. It was very clear, I think. Yeah. So, yeah. And what do you
I have a question.
Yeah, Pascal. Yeah.
What do you need to do to obtain a strongly polynomial algorithm? Is it a better analysis or already a different algorithm?
No, yeah, this analysis is pretty tight for this algorithm. Yeah, to get better dependence on epsilon or other parameters, you need to design a different algorithm. Okay. Yeah, so actually, yeah, people have designed specific algorithms for this problem using the convex optimization formulation. Maybe I'll mention the running times in the next lecture briefly. But yeah, yeah, for example, if you want a log 1 over epsilon algorithm, you just phrase this as a convex optimization problem and then use ellipsoid or something, ellipsoid in tier 1 method.
Okay. But it also follows from your next paper, right? Does it follow from your next paper? I forget now.
So actually, yeah, I'm not an author of the paper, but yeah, I mean, there's a paper by Alenzu, Yuangeli, Rafael, and Avi. So they design a faster algorithm than ellipsoid for this problem, which is which is also logarithmic in the epsilon parameter. Okay, so I'll talk about the running time in the next. So yeah, that is nearly linear time in some parameter regime.
Mhm.
So going back to Arvind's earlier question, so I'm missing in this, where is the dependence on the, so you just said if there is a perfect matching in the support, assume it's the identity, but it doesn't really matter. That particular product is being driven up close to 1. But if there is more than 1 matching, you cannot drive them all to 1.
Yes. Yeah. So then it won't be driven to 1. Like if there are multiple matching, right? It won't be driven to 1, this product. Somewhere in the middle, you'll stop. So yeah, this may be an overestimate on the number of steps taken. Like maybe it'll stop even before that.
I see. So here, this is showing that even if there is just 1
Yeah.
matching, then you
Yeah.
will get close to 1 in these many steps. But if there are multiple matchings, then for each one of them, it will gradually go up, and maybe you are not close to 1 on that one product, but the
Yeah.
sums are still.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a convex combination. So
Right,
you
right.
reach a vertex or you reach an interior point inside that permutohedron.
Yeah. So maybe if there are more than 1 matching, maybe the algorithm will be faster than.
It would have to be, because this argument
Yes.
would apply to each of those products,
Yes. Yes.
corresponding to each of the products.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Any more? So there was some more question. No. Oh no. Any more questions? No more questions. So then let's thank Ankit. Ankit comes back on October 8th. I think, now, no?
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so the next 2 talks are complexity theory talks. In fact, the next one is by Avi, and then there are 2 more, and then Ankit. Yeah, correct. Yeah, great. Lovely talk, Ankit. Thanks. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Bye. Oh, sorry, I